So, Nissan is in dire straits. No, not that one. This staple in Japanese automotive culture has been through the ringer over the past decade, selling the same tired cars for years with only minor updates just to try and stay relevant. The company ran through CEOs like sick days, until recently with an all-new CEO that stepped up to the plate, Ivan Espinosa, responsible for managing Nissan's Latin American and Southern Asian division, has stepped up to become Nissan's newest CEO with a brand new approach: make cool cars again. One way of achieving this, he wants to bring back the legendary Silvia. But what is the Silvia? How does it differ from the rest of Nissan's sports car menu, let alone the buffet of JDM offerings? Let's find out. Back in the early 60s, Yamaha and a German designer named Albrecht Goetz teamed up with Nissan to develop a sports car prototype known as the A550X. Due to creative differences, the project was scrapped, but two engineers, Kazuo Kimura and Fumio Yoshida, took what they learned from the project and put it towards the CSP311, otherwise known as the Silvia. Unveiled in 1967 at the Tokyo Auto Salon, the Silvia was based on the Fairlady chassis and housed a 1.6-liter R-Series 4-cylinder, pumping 96 horsepower to the rear wheels. Not too bad for a car weighing only 1 ton, and all the body parts were handmade, contributing to an absolutely gorgeous, though rare car. Only 554 miles were ever produced. The Silvia even became the fastest Japanese production car ever made, at 103 miles per hour. The Silvia would see a sequel roughly a decade later, with the start of the S platform lineage. The S10 Silvia began production in 1975, housing a 1.8-liter L18S motor, same as the Bluebird 910 in Japan, pumping 104 horsepower. This would also be sold as the Datsun 10SX here in America, featuring a bored-out L20B, pumping 110 horsepower. This car was so good, Paul Newman, of all people, built a 77-200SX for IMSA and took home some wins. This thing had leaf springs in the rear, like a truck. Hot off the success of the S10, both here in Japan, Nissan unveiled the S110 in 1979. And featured a host of new engine options, from the L19 all the way up to the FJ24, a dual overhead cam 4-cylinder designed for the rally homologated 240 RS. Only 200 were ever built, and none reached US shores because Nissan didn't feel it was worth the effort because of our emissions regulations. Okay, fair enough. But besides the insane rally specs of the 240 RS, the S110 gained new 80s styling, very boxy, very American, but sadly was overshadowed by the rest of the S lineup, including later on the S12 in 1983. Ditched the boxiness for a curvy look, reminiscent of the Levin and Truant at the time. The S12 came with the same CA18S that was in the R31 Skyline, but later would be offered the same V6 as 300ZX. It's not too bad for a still relatively small sports coupe, but let's be honest for a second, you didn't click on this video for any of these damn things. The real legacy, as we know, of the Silvia began in 1988 with the S13.
Nissan 200SX. Sleek, smooth, refined, a moving work of art.
Known as the 200SX in Europe and 240SX here in the States, the Silvia blew every other Silvia out of the water. Multi-link rear suspension, 4-wheel steering via the Hikas 2 system, a limited slip diff, and in 1990 we got the mother of all 4-bangers. Except the B series, or the K series arguably, the SR20. While the CA18 motors weren't anything to scoff at, the SR20, the DET in particular, was a turbocharged joy, always making efficient power, and it was perfect for drifting and tuning due to its reliability. There's a reason Iketani had an S13 in Initial D when he crashed it. there were 3 different model designations for the Silvia going forward: J, Q, and K, based on playing cards. J meant the base of Joker, Q was mid-tier, Queen, and K was the top-of-the-line King model, with all the bells and whistles, the best motors. Following the success of the S13 and the rise of Nissan after the R32 skyrocketed them into becoming the face of the JDM market, Nissan would unveil the S14 at the tail end of '93. A longer and wider wheelbase gave the S14 better handling, and a new body made it look bigger. However, due to its large size, it wouldn't fit in the same tax bracket as the S13, therefore steeper taxes on ownership. That, on top of a wider global public choosing SUVs instead of smaller sports cars, led to a decrease in sales overall, killing the fastback and convertible variants relatively early on. That didn't prevent Nissan from throwing everything they could into the K trim. NVCT, or Nissan Variable Cam Timing, was introduced on a new variation of the SR20 DET, featuring a larger turbocharger. The S14Ks now made 217 horsepower at 15 pounds of boost over the previous Ks. We then got a mid-generation refresh known as the S14A, which was our intro to the S14 here in the States as the 240SX. However, we got the K24DE motor without a turbo. Boo. The S14 ended on a high note when Nismo busts in and makes the 270R, 270 horsepower, 2 limited slip diff, and a badass body kit. And back seats. Only 50 were made, capping the S14's run off with a stylish bang. In 1999, we finally got the S15, the final Silvia, for now. A brand new design, which was smaller than the S14, facing that tax issue, and it had a more powerful SR20 DET, pumping 250 horsepower to the rear wheels, nearly matching that Nismo 270R. Nissan would drop the playing card base model designation, going for just Spec S and Spec R, with an aero option being offered for both. However, the swan song of the Silvia's run is the top-of-the-line Spec R Aero, with anti-roll bars, strut bracing, an Aisin Seiki 6-speed manual, 4-piston brakes from the Fair Lady, and the final SR20 DET. The final Silvia rolled off the line in 2002, but the legacy lived on past discontinuation. Mitsuoka, a Japanese automaker and coach builder, began making
This is the most inappropriate road trip car ever made.
This horrific automotive abomination was based on Silvias provided by the customer. They continued making these things with new models being introduced, adopting a new Silvia, until 2007. The motorsport world would end up adopting the Silvia too, being used in pretty much every form of motorsport possible, from rallying with the S12 generation with the aforementioned 240 RS, to consistent success within the JGTC becoming the Super GT in the GT300 class. They drag race these things, and of course, we couldn't forget drifting. As it turns out, the Silvia was fantastic if you wanted a fun, reliable, well-built little sports coupe. The SR20 line of engines are robust and durable, perfect for drifting when you're having to hold the motor at redline most of the time. And if something breaks, you're bound to find whatever parts you need. They made this motor for 20 years. I'm sure someone has a timing chain somewhere. If you don't want to just order one online. So 22 years after the Silvia wrapped production, Nissan wants to bring it back. They killed it to streamline production of future models, instead of having a bunch of random platforms for specific different models. This was expensive, so the sort of successor to the 200SX here would be kind of the Infiniti G35, which was just the Nissan Skyline base in Japan. And both of these are based off of the 350Z, which was introduced as the S15 was on its way out. I'm not going to say that the 350Z is the S15 successor because it's a Z. It's a totally different thing. And the Infiniti is only sort of a successor because it's a front-engine, rear-wheel drive sports coupe, even if it was more expensive than the 350Z, which wasn't what the Silvia was supposed to be. You know, it's funny. Growing up, I never understood what the Silvia was supposed to be. I grew up in Detroit. If I wanted to spend 20 grand on a sports car, I'd rather have something that doesn't have only 200 horsepower and get a Fox body or a Camaro. That's just what I grew up on 20 years ago when I was 8, playing Gran Turismo. Good lord, I'm getting old. But upon seeing how Nissan just threw out the Silvia, trying to fill the gap with the Z and an Infiniti, I understand now why it's still so popular. It's a simple, no-gimmick sports car that can be tuned into whatever you want for a good price. A good price. Which begs the question, what is Nissan going to do with the new quote-unquote Silvia? Are we getting a proper competitor to the 8.6, where it'll cost 30 grand to be able to handle whatever gets thrown at it? Or are we getting a fluffed up Infiniti or a Z, where it's too expensive and isn't even worth the price? Either way you put it, it's way too early to tell. Development just started on it, and we probably won't get any idea as to what it'll be until years later. It could be an EV, it could be a hybrid, it could be an 8.6 rival. Until then, let's suspend our disbeliefs and just wait. We already have decades of Silvias to drive, tune, and drift to our heart's content.